CompTIA A is the entry-level cert everyone tells you to get. It's treated like the welcome to IT badge, but is it actually worth it, or is it just another checkbox? Because I recently took A+ Core 1 and Core 2, and I'm gonna be honest, I barely studied. On one practice test, a couple labs to understand the format, and that was it. That's not me trying to flex, that's me telling you exactly what A+ feels like after 15 years in IT and cybersecurity. I took it as part of my plan to finish my bachelor's degree at WGU, and now that I've had a few weeks to sit with it, I want to share my real thoughts, what A+ is good for, what it's not, and whether you should bother. If you've ever been told you don't have the right cert even though you clearly can do the job, hit like and subscribe and comment. What's the dumbest checkbox requirement you've seen in tech hiring? Also, fun fact, I took A+ a few weeks ago and talked about it in my Discord matrix and on stream as I was preparing and after I passed. So if you want the raw real-time takes and Q&A, those links are in the description. But now I finally sat down and recorded the thoughts I wrote down after the exam. So here's what we're covering. What A+ is supposed to represent, how I prepped, how the exam actually feels, who A+ helps, who should skip it, and why cert culture plus HR filters are shaping IT in a way that I honestly hate. Before my A+, my CISSP was basically my first real cert, unless you count an old Windows XP one and some Windows Server one my dad pressured me into when I was in high school. I don't really count those. I've always been more of a prove-it-with-work person, building systems, troubleshooting, automating, documenting, and shipping things. But I kept getting this vibe that experience wasn't enough because HR and automated filters don't read nuance. They read keywords, they read checkboxes, and yeah, I did recently land a new role that's about 40% pay bump and still hybrid as of this video, but why I left my previous job and the lessons from that part of my life, that's another video, different level of spice we'll get into. This one is about the checkbox. So when people say everyone should get A+, what do they mean? They mean A+ is supposed to prove you can handle the basics. Hardware troubleshooting, operating systems, basic networking, basic security hygiene, support fundamentals. In other words, can you survive in a help desk environment without being a danger to yourself and or others? And that's the promise. The reality is, it depends on who you are. If you're brand new, A+ can be a solid structured roadmap. If you've already been tinkering for years, building PCs, running Linux, setting up networks, doing home lab stuff, A+ is going to feel like a formality. And if you're already mid-level, it's probably a waste of time unless you need the checkbox for HR, which, spoiler, a lot of people do. Here's what I actually did. I took the practice test once, just to see the pacing and style. I did a couple labs to get comfortable with the performance-based questions, and that was basically it. Because the truth is, if you've been home labbing, doing support, touching Windows and Linux, troubleshooting Wi-Fi, and replacing parts, dealing with printers, A+ is stuff you learn naturally just by existing in IT. I'm not saying nobody needs to study, I'm saying for me, it was baseline muscle memory. So, the scores that I got? Core 1, 847 out of 900, with passing being 675. Core 2 was 826 out of 900, with passing being 700. I finished both exams in about 50 minutes, give or take. Again, this isn't me trying to flex. This is me telling you, content-wise, it's foundational. The hardest part wasn't the content, it was the wording. I took both exams on site. Online proctoring can be a lot. Camera rules, desk rules, interruptions, and sometimes the proctor experience is more stressful than the exam itself. For example, when I took my technician license for my ham radio, I did it online and I was so stressed out, but the general ham license, which was more in-depth, I was more relaxed in, and I took that in person. Also, in regards to accommodations with my ADHD, I'm allowed to mouth words or whisper read while I'm working through questions. I do it without thinking. It helps me process sometimes in a quiet room. Some of you probably do this too. I didn't want to jump through online hoops or wait for approvals like I have for other parts of WGU. Plus, I feel less pressure on site. As I said, happened with my ham radio exams, so I know this from experience. The environment matters, even if the test is harder. So find what works best for you. Let me describe A+ like this. It's not hard, it's CompTIA A. Sometimes the questions are written like, here's half the scenario, here's two answers that could be right, here's one word that changes everything, good luck. In real IT, you ask follow-up questions. You can gather logs, confirm symptoms. You don't troubleshoot with vibes. There were questions where I felt like you didn't give me enough information to answer this properly. And in the official practice materials, there were a couple questions that felt flat out wrong. So, content, basic. Question style, annoying. Back when I worked at Staples as an Easy Tech, their version of Geek Squad, I was trying to work my way into professional IT before I landed my first MSP, managed service provider gigs. A customer is looking at laptops, and I'm doing my usual be helpful routine, making sure they don't buy something underpowered or overspend on something they'll never use. And this guy gets smug and goes, "I don't think you can help me. I already have my CompTIA A+." And I remember thinking, my dude, at that point in my life, I was already daily driving Linux for years. I had PF-Sense in my house, and Staples used to let us take recycling computers home as home lab projects as long as we pulled the drives. So I was rebuilding stuff constantly. So yeah, I didn't have the fancy paper yet, but I absolutely understood what he needed. And here's the lesson. If you know what you need, cool. Don't be rude. I'm never rude to Micro Center employees. Worst case, I say, no thank you, because you never know what someone's capable of, and not everyone had the same opportunities or stability. I grew up in a broken home. Things weren't stable. I barely passed high school because I found it boring and wouldn't do homework, but teachers would see me ace tests without trying. Early adulthood was bumpy. I won't get too deep into it here. My learning path was a lot of home labbing and tinkering because I couldn't afford the neat, polished, right path. For a period of time, I even apprenticed as an electrician before fully committing to tech. Then I landed MSP gigs. Got exposed to real-world chaos, and that's where I figured out what I wanted to do. And honestly, I didn't really figure it out until around 25 years old, after a bad breakup and realizing I needed to change and focus on building a real career. So, if you're just starting adulthood and you feel behind, don't worry. A lot of people don't figure it out until later. The key is that you keep moving. Now, yes, I'm aware of the Linus Tech Tips situation with CompTIA, and I want to be careful here because this video isn't about drama, but I do want to be honest. I've been watching Linus since the NCIX Tech Tips days, and if I'm being real, a few years into it, I started noticing something. It felt like he wasn't really leveling up his knowledge the way the rest of us who grew up watching him were also doing, most of us because we had to advance in our careers. And because of that, it's hard to take a lot of his views and approaches seriously sometimes. Sure, people write him off as entertainment, and that's fair. But years ago, he strayed from the reasons I watched him in the first place, when it actually felt more helpful and informative, and I won't deny it. Early on, I learned a bunch of things from his content. I've talked about that on stream. I could go on, but that's not what this video is about. I just wanted to call that out. As far as the CompTIA incident itself, I reacted to it live when it happened quite a while ago, before he ultimately took it down and criticized how unprofessional it was. I didn't like the recording of the test. I didn't like the vibe of it. It doesn't help IT, it doesn't help cybersecurity, and it doesn't help people trying to get into the field. And because of my reaction video, I ended up speaking with CompTIA executives when they were doing cleanup of the entire incident, with all the other traces on the internet, with CompTIA registered and copywritten materials. My understanding was they also reached out to Network Chuck 2, if I'm not mistaken, and the video was ultimately taken down, and we, agreed to that. Separately. I at least did on my own. That's my understanding with Network Chuck. Now, to be crystal clear, CompTIA was cordial and polite. No threats. They even offered that I could edit parts out. But it wasn't worth the effort of going through and editing an hour-long live stream reaction video. And honestly, I agreed with the core concern. Reacting to it still amplified what was wrong with it. Also, I'm not in the business of burning bridges. If I wanted to keep my CISSP, keep building my career, and maybe need CompTIA certs later, as I'm doing now, I'm not going to be reckless. I'm not recreating questions. I'm not showing studying material. I'm not doing, here's what was on my test. I'm just giving you my experience and opinion. Now, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor today, Proton. If you've been watching my content, you know I'm big on reducing your attack surface because breaches, data brokers, and account takeovers are basically the default reality now. That's why I like Proton's ecosystem. Proton Mail for encrypted email, Proton VPN for safer networking on the go and public networks, and Proton Pass for passwords. And the aliasing features can help cut down on spam, tracking, and oops, my email got sold again! If you want to support the channel and check them out, use my link in the description. So, where am I at now? When I first wrote the notes of this video, I had only knocked out a handful of classes, but as of recording this, I'm basically 2/3 done with my entire WGU program in a single term. And since then, I've already passed ITIL V4, Network Plus, and Security Plus. I've got separate videos already planned for all three because honestly, those exams were where the conversation gets way more interesting than A+. Now, I'm not done yet. I still have more certs in the pipeline, including Project Plus, LPI Linux Essentials, Data Plus, CISSP Plus, and Pentest Plus. So if you want my real opinion on those, what felt useful, what felt like exam theater, what surprised me, and who I'd recommend to each one, make sure you're subscribed, because that content is already mapped out. And honestly, the further I get into this degree, the more I'm convinced A+ is the perfect example of the problem, because it's treated like a golden ticket, but it's really just baseline. Now, that I've had a few weeks to sit with it, here's my real takeaway. A+ is foundational, but the exam is written in a way that can make foundational topics feel harder than they are. Because it's not testing how you troubleshoot in real life, it's testing whether you can speak CompTIA A. If you're new, treat it like learning the language of the exam. If you're experienced, treat it like a hoop you have to jump through. And if you're someone who feels discouraged because you don't have certs yet, remember, certs don't make you capable. Work makes you capable. Use certs strategically. Don't worship them. If you're entry level and you need something to get past filters, A+ can help. It won't hurt. If you're mid-level or senior and already doing real work, skip it and go higher. Because A+ doesn't prove you're good at IT. It proves you can study and pass a test, and yes, you can absolutely vomit knowledge and forget it later. But hiring has become checkbox driven, and with AI screening and HR filters, sometimes you play the game because the system forces you to. That's what this was for me. So, that's the story. I checked the box, got the scores, and moved on, and officially now I'm qualified for IT help desk after being in IT and cybersecurity for 15 years. Jokes aside, now I want to hear from you. Was A+ easy, brutal, or just annoying because of the wording? And if you're studying right now, what part are you stuck on? I'll help where I can without turning this into what was on my test. If you got value out of this, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone grinding through certs. And again, if you want the real conversations and the live takes, I talked about this when it happened in my communities, Discord, Matrix, and on stream. Links are in description. All right, see you in the next one. Happy hacking.